This is Vincent Sutton II interviewing Kelvin Davis for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 10:35 a.m. on December 5th, 2025. This interview is being recorded at WEAA in Baltimore, Maryland. Can you please state your full name and what your relationship is to WEAA and Morgan State University?
My name is Kelvin Davis. I'm an alum, Morgan State alum, graduate of 1997 alum. WEAA, was my first internship. So I was at the time it was called telecommunications, was the major, now School of Global Communication Journalism, but it was telecommunications back then, and WEAA was my first internship that I had.
Nice. Can you tell me a little bit about when and where you were born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Let me say I was born in Brooklyn Hospital, but I was raised in, I claim, we'll say, raised Queens, New York.
Okay. So you were born in Brooklyn.
Born in Brooklyn.
Claim Brooklyn.
Claim Queens.
Oh, claim
Claim Queens. Yeah. My whole family, when they moved, so my parents migrated from South Carolina, North Carolina, and they landed in Brooklyn. So they were in Brooklyn. So all my relatives moved, Great Migration and stuff. So they all moved to New York, and so everybody was in Brooklyn. So when it was time for me to be born, and I just say I have a twin brother. So my twin were born. They went to Brooklyn because that's where they knew. But our house is in Queens, so when they went to the hospital, I was born in Brooklyn. But when I came back home, I was in Queens. So Queens. Cambria Heights, Jamaica, Queens.
So you mentioned your parents coming from North and South Carolina. Were they born and raised in those areas and then made that migration? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Correct. So my dad was born in this little small town called Hollister, North Carolina, and my mother was born in Sumter, South Carolina. And my dad went into the military. Actually, he was going to the military, and he was like, but I want to get out of North Carolina. So he migrated to New York, joined the Army, got out of the Army, stayed in New York. My mother, my grandparents, they ended up moving from South Carolina to New York. They're just like, just a better way of life and stuff like that. So they moved to New York when my mother was 15, and my dad was 18 when he moved to New York. But she moved when she was 15, and then like all my family from my mother's side, they moved from South Carolina. Once they got to New York, everybody was like, all right, come on up. So they sent like the SOS out to get everybody to come to New York and stuff.
So tell me a little bit about your childhood. I know you said that you have a twin brother. Tell me a little bit about who he is, and is he your only sibling?
No. So I have two other siblings. I have an older sister and an older brother. Okay. So the four of us, or five of us, if you can count the whole family and stuff like that. Just modest, I guess. People, we're just describe it. We're just one close unit. My twin has special needs, but he's a trooper. My older brother still lives in New York. My sister lives in New Jersey. Close in family. My dad actually passed away early this year. Yeah. So that was tough, but we're all good.
So tell me a little bit about growing up in Queens. What was it like growing up in that era, particularly with coming up in this era of hip hop?
No doubt. Yeah, Queens staple in hip hop is so prominent. I grew up in the 80s, obviously, so the Cambria Heights is a section of Jamaica. So within Jamaica, you have Hollis, so you have Run DMC. You have St. Albans, which is Cool J, Tribe Called Quest. Hollis also Ja Rule. Southside Jamaica is 50 Cent. So go a little bit later and stuff. But So obviously Run DMC they're like, that's my favorite group. Obviously they were the first group I heard, and I was trying to memorize their lyrics and stuff like that. So it was a dynamic time just because all right, Run DMC is the biggest hip hop artist, and they're from my borough. They're from literally. I mean, I used to get my hair cut. It's called barbershop called King's Barbershop on 225th Street and Linden Boulevard, and DMC used to get his hair cut in there. So I see him around the way all the time and stuff. You see him dropping down the block. LL, same thing. So it was a surreal moment. Like these people are national legends, and they're minutes away from where I grew up. So LL went to high school. The zone high school for my neighborhood was called Andrew Jackson High School. Now it's called, they changed the name of it to Campus Magnet because it was a lot of issues in high school. So they tried to change the name and tried to change the image and stuff. But yeah, he went to that high school. So it was just a amazing time. Hip hop just coming on the scene. Making its main entrance in the 80s and stuff. Obviously in the 70s it was your pioneers and stuff like that. But as far as like breaking that ground, you have obviously Furious 5 and Grandmaster Furious 5, but Run DMC makes that main imprint, MTV commercially and stuff like that. Obviously gets to that next level. So yeah, Queens is definitely was definitely on the map.
And what was it? What was it like just being a kid in Queens outside of being able to see these local and these national legends?
I think Queens is always under the radar to me. Brooklyn gets all the praise and stuff like that, but I think Queens is the most diverse place on the planet. They call it the world's borough. You have every neighborhood. There's like so many different neighborhoods and stuff like that. So you have such a melting pot of everything. You have outside of, I think, Athens, Greece, and Sydney, Australia, Queens has the highest Greek population in the world. So, but everything's in Queens. Mexicans, Argentinians, Colombians, everything, and it's just like they have like their own neighborhoods and stuff like that. So, Italian, obviously Irish, you have everything. So, it's just Queens is just a great melting pot of different backgrounds, but also at the same time, I think you have, like I said, the 80s was an interesting time. You have, the crack epidemic and stuff like that. So that's infiltrating Queens as well. Where I grew up, Cambria Heights, definitely people used to call it Cambria suburbs because it was right on the border of Long Island too. So it was a nice neighborhood. The only issue is like, especially where I went to high school in a school called Benjamin Cardozo, which is in Bayside, Queens. So on very north side of the borough, and there were it's more affluent, we'll say it like that, even than Cambria Heights where I grew up. So traveling there to school, I had to travel back through all those neighborhoods, Southside Jamaica, Queens, where 50 Cent grew up, the Lost Boys, so those neighborhoods and stuff a little bit rougher. So although my neighborhood, Cambria Heights, is insulated from, a lot of the craziness going on, you still deal with a lot of elements because you're still in the same borough, you're still around the same people, you still travel the same neighborhoods and stuff like that. So you still have a little bit of that the rough areas that you have to go through and stuff. And but all in all, I think it was a good upbringing. I've always thought about writing a book, My Neighbor, because you have the perception of people say black neighborhoods, they don't have 2-parent households. Everybody in my block had a 2-parent household. So, and even if parents split up, the father was always prominent, and you would see him on the block all the time. They were always around, stuff like that. So we had that definitely good neighborhood vibe where you hear people say, "Oh, yeah, if you're doing something wrong, your neighbor will spank you." that was definitely true in my neighborhood. Or they'd get you, and then your parents would get you. So um, it was good. It was definitely a village. Everybody helped to raise everybody, and even I was just in New York last week for the holidays and stuff, and seeing some of my old neighbors, it's the same thing. It's like they're like my aunts and uncles in a sense, because they helped raise me as well.
So tell me a little bit about your parents' influence. You mentioned that every household had a two-parent household, and then you mentioned both of your parents. Tell me more about your parents.
My parents, they're the best. They're completely encouraging. My dad he owned two companies. He owned a bus company, and he owned an eyeglass company. So I learned hard work from him. Definitely, he was just was always on the grind, always family first. You know, family first, but also community based. So he was a scoutmaster. He was a athletic coach in the neighborhood. So he was always giving back. He was like my teammates. I had teammates that lived in some of the we had so the neighborhood. I played baseball growing up, and our baseball team had kids who lived. So they didn't live. Some of them didn't live in Cambridge Heights in our neighborhood. They could be living some other places and stuff. St. Albans or Laurelton, which is neighborhood's Rochdale. And he was like, but some of their parents might have split up or something, And so some of my teammates lived in Brooklyn, some lived in the Bronx, and my dad would drive them home. He was like, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take care. We're supposed to take care of each other, So I learned that example from him, just like if you could help somebody, help them. And my mother was the same way. She was very supportive of my dad. She worked in graduate admissions for Queens College. So, obviously doing educational wise, she was, helping people through grad school and stuff like that as well. So my parents were very supportive. Always trying to help somebody, so that was always something I learned watching them. And, I use that today, what I do and stuff like that. So it was like, they led by example.
So you mentioned your mom working graduate admissions at Queens College. I'm going to make the assumption that she was very hard on the family about education. What was school like having someone like her?
Oh yeah. So my mom was like, I would get. It's funny. She would go if I got a bad grade or I complain about school or something that was going on. She's like, I'm on the teacher side. I'm on the principal side. She was never on my side. They were supportive. They were supportive in things we did and stuff like that. But as far as education, if you did something wrong, they're like, oh no, it couldn't have been the school. It couldn't have been the teacher, administrator. It was you. So, that was something that I had to I had to learn. It was like, all right, you know what? Let me make sure I got my act together. Especially if there's something that was on their end, I can come to them like, all right, this is going on. But for the most part, it was very strict, very strict. I put in punishment a bunch of times for for grades and stuff like that. What are you doing? So. But it was good to keep us all aligned.
So being in school, were there any subjects that stood out to you that were really interesting? Let me kind of do this, or you did this really well.
So interesting. When I was in high school, my high school, Benjamin and Cardozo, was a law high school. So, but I went there to play baseball. So because they were probably a baseball school. So, but they also had law. So I was like, wait, let me think about going into law. And it was kind of heavy. I was like, nah, I don't think I want to go that path. So, but I always had an interest in history, and so I was did well in history. I did well in English and stuff like that. The math and sciences totally struggled. So that was like, so I thought about going into. I thought actually, when I got to Cardozo, I was like, all right, they had law, but I was like, what, I was going to be a dentist too at one point. Yeah, I swear, try. It's like math and science. Like, no, this is not going to work. So, I kind of gravitated to more toward history and English and stuff like that on a high school level. And then college obviously was a little bit different, but
So I want to go back before we jump to you coming to Morgan State. You said you had an interest in hip hop and you saw it in its infancy. What else? What else was playing in the household that grabbed your attention?
my parents were big. Um, I won't say that. It's funny. They didn't play music in the house a lot. I played music a lot, and my neighbor was a DJ, and so he had his own equipment and stuff like that. And his mom would play music too. So, and my parents, they had records, and we had an 8-track, and so they would play some music. Um, Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, Nancy Wilson, Temptations, Four Tops, Marvin Gaye, records like that. But they didn't play them a lot, And then my parents were very religious and stuff like that, so we had some gospel. We had gospel obviously playing it too. Harry Jackson and Soul Stirrers and Blind Boys at Mississippi. So they would some Mississippi Mass Choir, Blind Boys of Alabama, and so they play that too as well. But a lot of my musical influence, some of it came from them, but a lot from my neighbor and stuff like that. So I kind of gravitated to my neighbor who was DJing, so I hear him playing, and they didn't get big as DJs. They played a little local and stuff like that, but it was always like, oh, we got to be like Disco Twins, Infinity Machine, who were big Queens DJ. Obviously in the Bronx, yeah, Kool Herc and Bambaataa and Flash and DJ P. Jones, DJ Mario and stuff like that in the Bronx and stuff like that. And then, but in Queens, yeah, Infinity Machine, Disco Twins were like big DJs. So I was always hearing trying to compare to them and so I'm like, all right, what are they playing? I was a little bit young. They're like 9 years older than me, my neighbors. So, I was a little kid and stuff compared to them, but just hearing the music and obviously hip hop infiltrating. But obviously, like I said, and then the radio too. So New York radio, you had two big stations, WBLS, 107.5 FM, Kiss FM 98.7. Frankie Crocker was like a massive DJ in, the Chief Rock, as they call him. So hearing him on the radio, I used to listen to the radio all the time. Actually, I should say 3 stations. So those 2 stations, there was like a small station called 105.9 WHBI. And I say here, Africa Islam, stand with the Zulu Nation. And Mr. Magic, who was like a big New York DJ, Juice Crew, Big Daddy Kane, Cool G Rap and stuff like that, Molly Mall. And so hearing those guys on the radio, I was like constantly listening to music, I would listen to music 12, 13, 14 hours a day, just constantly and stuff like that. So that was my influence of, just my early influence.
So doing well in high school, minus the math and science.
Yeah.
Your mom is a graduate assistant at Queens College. How do we go from Queens College to Morgan?
So this I've told this story a bunch of times recently. To you, and as you know, yeah, I could have went to Queens College for free. So believe me, that was a hard conversation. So I was like, and my grades weren't that great to get a full scholarship either. So I was in high school and I'm listening to people talk. Most of the people in my block, even my older sister went to North Carolina Central, but she's a lot older than me, so I didn't see her journey going to school and stuff like that. And my older brother, he was in and out of college, so he didn't even finish. And so I didn't have an example of, and nobody on my block, all my friends, nobody went. I'm trying to think. None of the people my age or older went to college. So I didn't really have an example of seeing that in my actual neighborhood. Now, my high school, very high performing, very high academic school. So I saw a lot of people talking about college and stuff in that aspect. So that was kind of my, my. By the time I got to, we're deciding looking at schools and stuff like that, and a couple girls who I was interested in, they were talking about, oh, I'm going to go to Spelman, and I'm ignorant at this point. I just watch different worlds, stuff like that, but I wasn't really, I got that aspect of HBCUs and stuff like that, and so I was like, oh, this is cool, just watching the show, it's a dope show and stuff, and but hearing them talk, they're like Spelman. I knew Howard. There were people in my school who went to Howard, and people in my church who went to Howard and stuff like that, or Hampton. So I was familiar with those two schools. I knew Morehouse, obviously, Dr. King, so, from that aspect. But they were like, I'm going to Spelman. I'm like, oh, I should apply to Spelman. They were like, I guess I can't apply there. So, but, I was interested to go, so I was like, I want to go where you're going, so they were talking about Spelman. Then they were talking about Howard Hampton. Then they were talking about another girl that I really liked. She was like, I'm going to Morgan. I was like, oh, I'm going to Morgan. She's going to Morgan. I'm going to Morgan. So I was like, oh, let me apply. So I applied to all these schools. I applied to, I applied to a lot of schools in New York too. Obviously Queens College and St. John's and Syracuse. And I got into all those schools and stuff. And I get the acceptance from Morgan. Like, I'm going to Morgan. And I was like, where's Morgan at? And my dad knew where Morgan was because he used to go to the Morgan State Grambling football games. Morgan State and Grambling played in Yankee Stadium in the late 60s and early 70s for years, like a prominent matchup. And so he was like, oh, Morgan State, yeah. It's like in Baltimore and stuff like that. And he said, my cousin lives in Baltimore, so you'll be, there's, it's cool if you want to go there. My mother was, she was kind of hesitant, baby going away and stuff like that. But yeah, I get to Morgan, and the girl doesn't even go to Morgan. She ends up end up going to NYU. So that was the the funny part of that story and stuff. But yeah, it was kind of like definitely a transition going from Queens to Baltimore and coming to Morgan stuff. So
Talk me through this transition. Like, you know, I feel like Queens College may be a little bit faster than Baltimore, but you're coming from a pretty prominent, as you said, affluent high school to an HBCU. Is there a culture shock? What's that transition like?
it was interesting because, and I've told this too to some people I've talked to in my neighborhood, from elementary and middle school, it was predominantly black. So I had that culture, experience, good experience growing up. And then when I got to high school, because even like Andrew Jackson High School, I believe it's definitely one of the first schools to have a metal detector in the country. Yeah, it was rough. So it was weird because, like I said, Cambridge Heights was a pretty affluent neighborhood, but because the way Queens is set up, it's not only people from Cambridge Heights that go to that school. You got the whole neighborhood. You got the whole South Jamaica that can go to that school. So you got people from all avenues coming. So definitely rough neighborhood, rough school. And my parents were like, "Oh, you're not going to this school." And then Springfield Gardens was another high school that was neighboring. That was like another zone school. They also had a lot of conflict going on there too. So like, yeah, you're not going there either. And so I ended up going to Cardozo and across town and stuff like that. So that was a culture shock going from my junior high school to high school. And see, I'm like, man, there's a lot of white people here, a lot of Asian people here. And like I said, Queens is such a melting pot. You see people, obviously, the stores locally, but seeing them on a day-to-day basis, and that volume was like, that was a culture shock going to high school. So I had a tough adjustment from 8th grade to 9th grade. Okay. I had a serious tough adjustment adjusting to The kids, especially because, um, a lot of the schools probably, I'm not sure where you grew up, but they'll have like feeder schools. Like if you live here, you go here. In New York, for the most part, if you live in the city, you can go to mostly any school in the city outside of specialized schools that you have to test into, like Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, Bronx Science, or like Townsend Harris. They were like these specialized schools that you had to test into, and there's a bunch of them now. Others than that, but it was like I know 4 main ones when I remember when I was growing up. So you would test in those schools, but other schools like you can go to. If I want to go to school in Brooklyn, I just go to school in Brooklyn. I can go to school in Manhattan. I can go to school in the Bronx, and yeah, that was something that you had no you can pick and choose and stuff like that. So the transition from my school to high school was like, oh, I don't know. I think I knew 2 people in that school that I knew from my neighborhood. There was there was no one else from my neighborhood that went to those schools. It was all people that lived on the other side of Queens. So that was an adjustment, and then like I said, the demographic of people was like definitely an adjustment to trying to get used to, and now I got to meet a whole new group of people. They don't know me, I don't know them, and so trying to assimilate into that population was difficult. And by the time I got to we by the time I became a senior, it took like 4 years, so it was kind of like people have cliques and stuff like that. So it was definitely an adjustment, and even academic wise, I didn't feel supported in the school. My whole 4 years, I never felt supported. Like it was always like, oh, you live in Jamaica? What are you doing here? It was always the lot of no teachers. I don't know if I had a black teacher in high school. I'm trying to think. I don't think so. So that was always interesting. But it was always a teacher like, oh, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. So there was no one encouraging, no one um, trying to like, hey, let me help you out here and stuff like it. I felt totally isolated in that incident. So that was an adjustment in high school. So when I get to college, Baltimore definitely rough. When I got when I finally touched down in Baltimore, driving down, like this looks like New York. It was because I'd never really been to Baltimore, so yeah, some of the neighborhoods were definitely reminded me of like Harlem, Brooklyn, Southside Queens, and stuff like that. So the Bronx, and so I was like, oh, Baltimore is a little New York, So that was kind of. But then getting to Morgan's campus was kind of different too. So, we're going through downtown Baltimore, but then driving up to Morgan's campus, I'm like, oh, okay, this is a nice little cut. This looks all right. So that was, and then seeing, just to see a black people was like, oh, this is it, yeah. So that was good.
So you mentioned not feeling like you had any support in high school. Was that an immediate change? Did you feel an immediate support here at Morgan State on day one?
Day one, literally day one. Um, we pull up to, so now O'Connell Hall, which just got torn down. Had me crying a couple weeks ago. Just got torn out a couple weeks. The dormitory, and the first that we pull up in front of the dorm, and this kid comes out, and he sees the New York tags in the car. So he was like, "Oh, you're from New York." So I get there. I missed. This is freshman orientation, so I didn't come to freshman orientation. Freshman orientation is like a week long. I was working. I was trying to make some money, so I was back in New York. But I had to come down to register for class. So my parents drove me down. This is in August. They drive me down to register for one day, and in that one day, I meet this kid's name is Quasi. I meet Quasi outside the building. He's like, "Oh, you from New York?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, I'm coming in the fall. So, "Oh, let me come and introduce you to the people." So from day one, he's a freshman. It's not like he's been here for 3 years. I mean, he's a freshman, but he comes and introduces me to 4 other people. He was like, "Oh, um, here's my friends." Just started introducing me to people like that, and then so I met a few people then, and then I come back come back in a couple weeks and move into the dorm. Same thing. I see him again. He was like, "Oh, let me introduce you to my friend Gaub, my friend Marlon, my friend Ruben, my friend Dan." So it was just like, my friend Don, my friend Damar. It was like all these people that were who are my friends to this day. We're like tight to this day. So it was just like, from a student perspective, that that nourishment just poured into me that day. Like, oh, let me not let you hang out here and not know anybody. Let me introduce you to somebody, off the bat. And then same thing when I got to register my classes. Um, I wish I could remember his name. I can't remember his name, but the counselor, he he's like taking me through the classes. He's like, all right, hey, this is what's being offered. You're a little late. Some other kids have already been down here registering and stuff like that. So, but um, I'm gonna work with you, and we'll get you into. You'll have. I think I took 13 credits my first semester, and he was like, we'll have all your basic requirements and stuff like that, so that'll be fine. And then he was like, talking about organizations, and it's talking about all the stuff that was appealing to me. I'm like, all right, this is things I can get into, and so it was just so encouraging. Like, you can do this. Just from those two experiences right there were like off the bat were just life changing.
Yeah, it sounds like there was an immediate, which I feel most people that go to HBCUs have that feeling. If it's not immediate as yours, there's a point where like they're like, this is it. So coming to Baltimore in 92, still loving music, when or what's your introduction to WEAA?
My introduction to WEAA was 90. Let me see. Was it 92? No, it was 90. Yeah, it was 90, 93. 93. We're playing we're playing spades. So I moved off campus after one semester. So as much as I love O'Connell was, is the foundation for some of my friends, some of my best friends to this day. That was my foundation. I didn't like campus life as far as it was too restrictive. I was like, this is too restrictive, visitation and all that stuff. And then too, I was like, I pitched to my parents. I was like, hey, I can live off campus for cheaper and save some money for you. We got a house. We rented a house off campus. It's like four of us, and we split that cost, and it was like $500 a month. So my parents were like, oh, $1,000 a year in housing. Oh, I could do that. So, um, um, the hip hop, we were playing spades at the house, and we were listening to the radio, and we listened to EA, and we're like, oh, they got an all night, I think we're just flipping around on the dial, and we're hearing hip hop playing at it's like midnight or something like that, and it was just strictly hip hop, and it's airing from midnight to like 5 in the morning. So, um, this hearing me was like, oh, this is like New York. So in New York we had like I said, WHBI at 105.9 and Stretch and Babito, Stretch Armstrong, Babito. They had their show, yeah, and they had their hip hop show. It was all night too as well. So there were two shows that were airing all night. So we're like, oh, we get to Baltimore. Like, oh, Baltimore get the same thing. They got hip hop on the overnight. Okay, this is cool. So that was like a staple. We were listening to that every weekend. We were listening to strictly hip hop and stuff like that. And obviously, during the day, I'm like, oh, they got jazz, and listen to, I love jazz too as well. So hearing the jazz, gospel grace on Sunday. You got talk shows. So it was just kind of a wide spectrum of different, and like, oh, this is our station. This is Morgan Station. After a while, we're like, oh, we didn't realize WEA is a Morgan station, on the campus of Morgan State. And so yeah, we were just ingrained from there. And then some of us, obviously, I had an internship. A lot of my friends had internships. Some of my friends ended up working here. Yeah, so that was.
So yeah, walk me through that. So what's the bridge going from listening to WEAA randomly to being involved with the station? And now I think my other question about that is how do you go, how do you get to broadcast journalism or not broadcast, mass communication?
And it's so interesting you said that because yeah, I'm listening to WEA, and like I said, I've always music is definitely, yeah, it's like, I mean, I love music. So I bought vinyl records for, every, I was talking to someone yesterday at work. I was like, um, every Tuesday back in the day, because that's when the albums used to be released, on Tuesdays, not on Fridays and stuff like that. But Tuesday, I'd be in the record store. There was a store in Queens called the Music Factory. There's another record store called Hot Wax, and I buy records every Tuesday. So I've always been involved. I've always loved music and stuff. So I think that was part of it. And then, I mean, I can think of songs. The first, Jodeci, "Come and Talk to Me" remix. It's the first one I remember hearing when I got on Morgan's campus. They were blasting on the bridge, so I can vividly remember the first time I heard that song. But I can do that with so many songs. Like, oh, I can go to this moment in time. So the music, um, the music aspect of things were, hearing, listen, like I said, we're playing space and listening to WA from that. Um, Fast forward to getting into mass comm, like I said, I took a class. Like I said, I had 13 credits my first semester. Then I ended up having, I think I ended up dropping a class. I think I know it was under, I wasn't a full time, so I think I had 11 credits. I had like 14, and I had this crazy, I don't remember the class. I think it was humanities, and which was a requirement. And I was like, I'm not. This class is crazy. I got to drop it. So I went to 11 credits, and my sophomore year, I was taking electives because I was undecided. When I got to Morgan. I was undecided major. I didn't get into mass comm at all. And my advisor was like, "Oh, you should start taking electives. You still need electives to graduate, um, in addition to your general requirements and your major. So you still have to take electives." So he was like, "You should take this elective called the media culture." I was like, "Okay, let me see what this is about." So the media culture was obviously basically talking about TV, all spectrums, TV, radio, print, film. And that class captivated my mind. It was like, so, yeah, just that, I was sprung off of that alone. So that, after that, pretty much that my first week of class, I was like, I'm changing. I know what I want to major in. I want to major in mass communications and stuff like that. So I went from that, and then, like I said, WEA used to be in Banneker Hall, and Banneker, if you walk in Banneker, the first thing you see is, it used to be like an edit suite to the right, and then you see signs of WEA. So I would go to WEA, and I would see, like, they would have all these, like I said, I love music, so they have all these cassettes and records in the office and stuff like that. So I'm like, my mind is blown. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is ideal and stuff like that. So my connection to WA, so I knew, I think it was Vinny V was like the program director back then, and trying to think now, Dwayne Johnson, who gave me my internship. He was a student at Morgan, but he worked Gospel Grace. My friend Roots, we call him Roots, named Patrick Lawrence. He was doing this show called Milk Crates, and so they were all in the office and stuff like that. So we kind of gravitated to them. And another guy named Ray, who was he was like assistant program director, I think, at the time. And so they were from New York too. So Roots and Ray were from New York, so we kind of bonded a little, on that as well. So, just seeing that connection, New York connection, music connection, yeah, WA, I was hooked.
So when you start working or start making the journey to WEAA, what's your thought process? Are you thinking, I want to be on air? Are you thinking, I want to be an engineer? I want to be a DJ? What was that thought process?
So that's funny. I thought about wanting to be on air. Like I said, I would listen to Frankie Crocker growing up. I would listen to I like all types of music and stuff. So Wolfman Jack was like a DJ in the 70s. So I used to listen to him. Casey Kasem, obviously, Dick Clark, and DJ Red Alert in New York. We had him on the radio. So, and just had all his personalities. So I thought about that when I was like, I'm going to go on the radio. Definitely going to radio. I took a class called, I think it was Introduction to Radio and Television. And I had two classmates, Marcellus, they call him the bass man, Chapard. Um, I hear him talking. I'm like, oh, I can't do that. His voice is like, he's still on the radio today, so he's doing big stuff too. Um, he, I hear him talking. His voice, I'm like, he sounds like Barry White. I'm like, oh, there's no way. I said, I can't do what he does. And then another friend of mine, his name is Rahman Kilpatrick. They both worked at WEA actually after more because they were so good. And it's from, like I said, it's from day one, from this 1993, 1994, something like that, in class with them. From day one, they were just like personalities were just so strong. So Rahman Kilpatrick, we call him Kill, and their personalities were so big. I'm like, and you probably shouldn't. My dad was so like, you can do anything, but I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that. So I kind of pivoted from radio. I was like, no, this is not gonna be my path. I'm gonna go in the television path. So I went more the television path than the radio production path, radio on air person.
Tell me about the internship here at WEAA. Like, you pivoted from not wanting to be on or wanting to be on air to not wanting to be on air. What was that foundational building like?
That was so good. And Dwayne Johnson, shout out to Dwayne. He was so instrumental. So again with the mentoring and the nurturing, he was like, all right, this is how you raise the audio levels on the board. This is how you speak into the microphone. This is how this gets transmitted to air. So he was so detailed on how, I knew from the listener standpoint, listen to the radio, but not the whole technical aspect of things. So he's, show me that. And like, oh, this is we get these CDs from each record company each week. He used to do the Gospel Grace show. He's a pastor now of his own church to this in current day. But he would have, it was like, all right, MCA Records, Columbia Records, they're sending their artists music to us now. And, this is something we're going to listen to see if we're going to play on the radio and stuff like that. So seeing how that worked as far as like the record companies sending the material, to promote their artists and stuff like that was eye opening to me because I didn't know that aspect of the business and stuff. So just getting that institutional knowledge on how that worked was so key. Seeing how all the pieces were being put together, and obviously, and NWA is good because some stations are they won't let you operate the equipment and stuff like that. So getting hands-on experience was eye-opening and a great learning experience for me as well.
Moving from mass comm or media studies, the internship here at WEAA, what did you learn at WEAA that really, like, what were those things that stood out when you got your first job out of school and were like, oh, this is it. I experienced this at WEAA and they prepared me for this part of my career.
It was the hands-on experience, and it was the pouring into you that you can do it. It was like, oh, you can do anything here. You're prepared. You know what to do. You know how to operate this. Whatever equipment. It could be the audio board. Could be the tape deck. We had reel machine. So we were at first learning how to splice and edit together at WEA. So they were like, all right, we need to edit out this this curse word. So get the razor, get the gray pencil, and mark your spot to where you're going to cut this tape, and then we're going to splice it together. So learning that when I got to um, MTV, I worked at MTV. When I got to MTV, they were doing real, and people were like, oh, I don't know how to do this. I'm like, oh, I've been doing this since I was in college. This is light work for me, you know. So yeah, just the skills of the day to day, and it was kind of like people wouldn't let you fail. Like, you know what, we're gonna do this until you know how to do it correctly. So what do you say, 10,000 hours? So it was, we're gonna keep on doing it. I'm gonna keep on training you until it's your last day. So I'm gonna keep on pouring into you until you're not working here anymore. You know, so that was the great thing about WA.
So, having been in the field for 30 years now, what would you like to see the Learning Lab be for WEAA?
I mean, I think the continuous of, there's always new. I try to stay abreast of new equipment that's coming into the scene because there's always something new. Even coming in here today, I'm like, this is complete. This is the first I've been in the new WEA studio. So, from the one in Banneker, seeing all the new stuff in here, there's always new equipment. I think the learning process of what's new is something that should always be, learn lab. Right? You know what? We have this new MIDI machine. We have a new audio board. We have a new playlist generator, whatever. So I think staying abreast of, on top of what's new, and learning, having people taught that, like, all right, let's learn this. This is what's coming out today. We're gonna stay on top of technology, because that's the one thing I see in the industry, where you definitely want to stay above the curve, because something's always around the corner coming. Like, all right, you know what? I need to learn this, or you can be out the game pretty much, in a sense, if you don't know what's coming, what's coming down the line.
Given that you started listening to WEAA, you got your internship here, and it really kind of helped you cut your teeth to get into the industry. What did you find unique about WEAA? You know, when you were here at Morgan, what did you find about, or what do you find unique about WEAA now?
Uh, Back then, I thought it was unique that the different formats of the station was, you know, gospel, jazz, um, Caribbean, hip hop, talk radio. So, in New York, it'd be like, all right, like I said, 98.7 Kiss FM, WBLS 107.5. They play R&B, hip hop, um, and Hot 97 now, in later years and stuff after that, in the 90s. And then some of them play. I should say they play reggae as well too, um, Caribbean music. But talk radio was all AM. So the AM stations were sports radio or talk radio, news and stuff like that. And gospel's another, I think it was 1600 WRAL and WWRL. So they would be like, stations that were from WBGO would be jazz station in New York, New Jersey, I think. And so they all had a different formats and stuff like that. Seeing all of that in one station was wild to me. That was a throw, So that was different. And then sports too. So broadcasting the Morgan games or whatever. So hearing all those things in the one word were different. But just seeing how WA has evolved now, I still see the talk format, the interviews, which I love now. They're doing interviews with obviously they do interviews with city politicians or community activists and stuff like that. But I hear like now they're doing interviews with players, athletes, coaches. They have a coaches show. I'm like, oh, this is so evolved now. It's so it's so much more than it used to. I'm like, okay, they're doing a thing.
Being a Morgan State alum, what do you think the station's value is to both the Morgan State community and the Baltimore community?
So Baltimore first, because I think the network the station represents so much of the community as far as like talking to community leaders and having their voices heard and talking to the people and stuff like that. I think that to the greater Baltimore community is a value that you can't get. You know, you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood, in your community, and is definitely well connected to everybody, all aspects throughout the city. As far as the station, I just think I pat myself on the back because I'm like, you got Morgan and Howard. I don't know any other, maybe in, I'm not even sure actually, other HBCUs that have radio stations. So I think those I'm sorry?
They're about 30.
I'm glad you just informed me. I just learned something new. So it's so prominent, you know, just and especially in this area. I think, you know, it's good to have that on our back. They're like, oh yeah, Morgan has a station, you know that you can have an outlet to.
Thinking back, can you describe a moment, particularly when you were interning here, where you saw the value of the station to maybe both the Morgan State community and the Baltimore community?
Yes, definitely as a hip hop fan, the strictly hip hop portion of the station was getting so many acts, so many artists were coming through here. They would if they were in town on tour or something like that, they would stop by the station. So just seeing that impact was like, whoa, this is big. Yeah, it's like a stop on their tour guide. They're making a point to come here. So I thought that was like this is impactful.
Yeah. So you see that as impactful. Do you see that as impactful to the campus or the community as a whole?
I think to both. I think to both. I think for Baltimore, it's like, okay, Baltimore is not people skip over Baltimore, go to DC a lot of times, and they forget about Baltimore. So I think for Baltimore, it was impactful, but for the campus too as well. It's like, all right, you know what? People are coming up on campus, and they get to see, one, we're a fully functional radio station, and then also look at the campus too. Like, oh, this is on the Morgan State's campus, So I think they get the both aspects of that.
Knowing what you know about HBCU radios now, how do you see them? How would you define specifically more so about WEAA? How do you define WEAA as a radio station?
I think it's community based. I think it's all aspects. I think it's such a well rounded station. You can get everything. You get news. You can get sports. You can get different formats of different genres. Yeah, I think that's it's so well put together that it's a powerhouse station.
What's important about WEAA?
I think to me it doesn't feel like it's I think it's a big station, but I think it doesn't feel like it feels like more like a community based station where they're talking directly to you. So I think to me that seems like it's more impactful where might be, let's say, a 92Q. 92Q is their city based, but they're music based, but it's not community fully around the clock, So like I think you can, when you listen to WA, you feel that it's connected to the community more so.
I saw that you ran for MSU alumni president. As an alum, how do you want WEAA to interact with the students?
I think that's a good question. I think that, and I've said it, I have like 30 mentees that are in this building, or have been in this building, maybe graduate as well. And I always say like WEAA is it's definitely an integral part of my career. But I think every student should touch this place. Everybody should come through here, at least through, if not an internship, but I don't know, kind of like a tour, but more. I don't even call it like a tour. Um, it'd be like, I guess it'd be more like a mentoring type of aspect, but it'd be like over a week or 2 weeks or something like that. Um, I used to work at Lifetime Television, and Lifetime Television used to do the only company I ever worked for that did this. If you were an editor, you had to learn what the camera operator was doing. If you were a camera operator, you had to learn editor. You had to learn. Everybody had to learn what everybody else was doing. If you worked in sales, you had to work with those. You had to sit in on with them for like a week or 2 weeks and see what they did, because it was kind of like you got to understand on how everybody's job impacts you, and it gives you the ability to have grace too. Like, sometimes they'll be like, "Man, I need this promo. What's taking a promo person so long?" Now you go sit in with the promo person who's editing, like, well, I have to wait for it to be shot. I have to wait for lighting. Lighting has to wait for, the camera operator has to wait for the lighting guy to get there. The lighting guy has to wait for the sound guy to get there. So you got to see how everybody plays a part in that piece of putting everything together. So it was kind of like, oh, you know what? So now I'm not gonna get mad because I know the process. And I think people need to know the process here. Coming through here would kind of give you an introduction into the field. And this is a professional organization, professional station. So you've seen the pros at work, and you can see how they go day to day. So when you get into the professional aspect, you can see how to conduct yourself too as well. So I think that could be an introduction as a freshman coming through WEA. Even if you don't want to get into radio, it's still seeing how a lot of the same elements in radio translate to TV, translate to film, translate to print. They all kind of all work together. A lot of students of my many's in podcasts, and I'm like, there's radio before podcasting. So you got to learn those. You got to learn those basic. You just can't turn on and just do it. It doesn't work that way. You got to learn. There's steps to this.
So, getting towards the end of the interview, I like to ask people, what is your one grain of salt that you want to leave with us?
One grain of salt. What do you mean? I got to.
What is it, or what advice would you like to give?
I think I like to say, be humble, be hungry, stay focused. Are like the main. Those are my main three things I like to tell people. That I think if you follow those, you kind of can. Everything else kind of like you. Those statements kind of like, if you're humble, you're not going to get too full of yourself to not want to keep on learning. Um, Hungry, obviously, you want to keep on driving to where you want to go, and then staying focused is, following that path, not getting off of the tangent, or following those goals. So those would be my three things: stay humble, stay hungry, stay focused.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vince.